Without objection, thank you, General Campbell, and thank you for your continued great leadership in a very difficult situation, and we are proud of your great leadership. On the hospital issue, and I know I speak for all members of the committee that our sympathy for those who were killed and injured in this tragedy is heartfelt and deep. Is it true that the strike was requested by Afghan forces on the ground that struck the hospital?
Sir, as I said yesterday in a press statement, yes, sir, that Afghan forces on the ground requested aerial support from our forces that are on the ground. But as I said in my opening statement, even though the Afghans request that support, it still has to go through a rigorous U.S. procedure to enable fires to go on the ground.
But there was no forward air controllers, American forward air controllers on the ground.
Sir, we had a special operations unit that was in close vicinity that was talking to the aircraft to deliver those fires.
Thank you. General Campbell, the President on 27 May 2014 made a long statement, said by the end of 2016, our military will draw down to a normal embassy presence in Kabul with a security assistance component, and I'm not making this up, as he said, just as we've done in Iraq. General, in your opinion, do the conditions on the ground warrant a change to the current plan for the drawdown of U.S. troops in Afghanistan?
Sir, thanks for the question. Sir, as I mentioned in my opening statement, when that decision was made in 2014, a lot has happened since then in transition. The growth of Daesh, the growth of, we didn't have a national unity government in 2014, the actions by Pakistan and the fight they've had to push additional insurgents inside of Afghanistan. Underneath that construct, it does not enable us to provide a CT component. And so as I've talked about on the options, I provided several options to the chain of command and will continue to work with my chain of command, provide them my best military advice, the pros and cons of each of those courses of action as we move forward.
Well, could I respectfully ask again, do the conditions on the ground warrant a change to the current plan that calls for by the end of 2016 we'd be a embassy-centric force?
So again, based on conditions on the ground, based on the transitions I've talked about, I do believe that we have to provide our senior leadership options different than the current plan that we're going with. Absolutely. The current plan as envisioned right now, sir, as you know, and as you talked about in your opening statement, is embassy-based presence. As I take a look at conditions on the ground, as we have to continue to provide TAA to our Afghan partners, when the President made that decision, it did not take into account the change over the last 2 years. And so the courses of actions that I have provided to my senior leadership provide options to adjust that.
Did the attack on Kunduz surprise? Maybe the word isn't surprise, but isn't it an indication that the Taliban have significant strength, including in an area in the north where they, generally speaking, did not have very much capability, thanks to the makeup there in northern Afghanistan?
So the Afghans and, quite frankly, coalition were surprised when the Taliban were able to take over Kunduz city. A lot of reasons, I think, why that the Afghans are taking a hard look as well to make sure they understand and do their own sort of after action on this. Part of the reason they didn't have many of the key leaders in place. The city, for the most part, had police. The Afghan army was on the outskirts. They did not reinforce. Bottom line, the Taliban were able to come in, attack from within the city, and quite frankly, surprise the police forces that enabled the Taliban to gain a great IO victory. I don't think the Taliban had intent to stay in Kunduz for very long. As soon as the Afghan forces were able to bring additional forces in, logistically resupply that, the Taliban, for the most part, melted away, left the city. There are small, isolated pockets that they continue to fight
from a PR standpoint, though, it was a rather significant victory for the Taliban.
Sir, absolutely, yes.
Finally, you said in your testimony, we'll need to help the Afghans address capability gaps in aviation, intelligence, and special operations, and I'd add logistics to that list. Shouldn't it be that you should be recommending not numbers of people to the White House, but capabilities, and then fill in the numbers after that? Is that the process you're using, or is it you're just giving them numbers?
So I deal in capabilities, as you talk about. So I look at the requirement and really the needs assessment that the Afghans would have, and try to base the courses of action based on those requirements.
So their needs are aviation, intelligence, and special operations, according to your testimony.
Sure, absolutely. Sustainment, logistics, the aviation piece, we just, quite frankly, started late on their Air Force, building their close air support capability. Logistics and sustainment is hard for any Army. For a U.S. Army that's been around for 240 years, try to compare that to an Afghan Army that's nascent and maybe only 8 to 9 years old, it is quite tough.
And aviation is one of the areas of most critical, I would argue. I think they have 2 helicopters, is that right?
So they have 2 functioning Mi-35 helicopters. They have several Mi-17s, and now they have the MD-530, which we introduced here. But as far as close air support helicopters, that is a key gap. As you know, sir, it takes 2 or 3 years to grow a pilot, 2 or 3 years to grow maintainers. We're doing that as fast as we can. They started out the season with 5 Mi-35s. Today they have 2, just based on airframe flyability.
Well, I thank you. And again, General, I would like to, again, express my appreciation for the outstanding job you're doing under extremely difficult constraints. I thank you, General.